Sign the plea, Marcus, or you're looking at 20 years in federal prison. I didn't do it.
The evidence says otherwise. You have 10 days.
Mama, they want me to sign something.
Did you do it?
No, ma'am.
Then don't sign anything. I'll be there Saturday.
Tell me about your right hand.
November. 2 broken, 1 dislocated, 6 weeks in a brace.
These invoices dated after your accident. Those were signed with a right hand that wasn't broken.
Find out what she knows. Shut her down. Routine compliance check.
Sign the plea. Marcus. Or, you're looking at 20 years in federal prison. The attorney's voice was flat. The way voices get when they've said the same thing too many times, to too many people, in too many rooms, exactly like this one cinder block walls, fluorescent light, a table bolted to the floor. Marcus Washington looked at the paper in front of him. Then he looked at the attorney, a young man named Garrett, who had the careful eyes of someone who had already decided how this ended. I didn't do it, Marcus said. The evidence says otherwise. The evidence is wrong. Garrett slid the paper closer. You have 10 days. After that, the U.S. Attorney's Office will pursue the full indictment. 22 years. Marcus, you'll be 66 years old when you come home. Marcus looked at the plea agreement for a long time. Then he picked up the phone on the wall. His mother answered on the second ring. Mama, he said, they want me to sign something. What kind of something? Guilty plea. Wire fraud. Federal contract fraud. The line was quiet for 3 full seconds. When Delores Washington spoke again, her voice was the same as it always was, level. Careful. The voice of a woman who did not make decisions until she had finished thinking. Did you do it? No, Mom. Then don't sign anything. I'll be there Saturday. She was there at 8 in the morning. She brought a binder. Delores Washington was 72 years old. 5 feet, 2 inches tall, with silver locks and reading glasses on a beaded chain. She ran a hair salon on the corner of Avenue T and 18th Street in the Ensley neighborhood of Birmingham, had run it for 40 years. Since the week after her husband Calvin died, and she needed something to do with her hands. To everyone who knew her, she was the woman who did your hair and remembered your grandmother's name and kept photographs of every client going back to 1983. Quiet, reliable, exactly what she appeared to be. Nobody knew what she had done before the salon. She sat across the scratched table from her son and opened the binder without ceremony. She had spent 3 days with the discovery file, requested herself through the federal court's public access system, printed, organized, tabbed. Tell me about your right hand, she said. Marcus blinked. My hand. The injury. When? He looked down at the 3 fingers that still didn't close all the way. November. 14 months ago. Caught it in a panel box on the Norwood job. 2. Broken. 1 dislocated. 6 weeks in a brace. Delores turned to the section labeled Invoices States Exhibit. She laid 3 pages on the table side by side and pushed them toward him. 11 invoices. 11 signatures bearing his name. All of them dated December through the following February. All of them after the accident. Marcus leaned forward slowly. He looked at the signatures. He looked at his right hand. Then he looked at his mother. Those were signed with a right hand that wasn't broken. Delores said quietly. The word landed in the room and stayed there. Mama, I need your hospital records. The workers' comp file. Dates. Physician's notes. Range of motion, documentation. And the names of every person who saw you struggling to use that hand during those 6 weeks. Marcus sat back. He was looking at her the way you look at something familiar that has just shown you it is something else entirely. How do you know what to look for? He asked. She capped her pen. I read, she said. I've always read. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. He had his father's forehead and his mother's eyes. And both of them were asking the same question. Not today, she said. Today we work Tell me about your hand. That was not the whole truth. But it was the truth she was ready to give him. She had never stopped reading. Reginald Pruitt heard about the mother on a Thursday. His attorney called. A woman had requested the full discovery file. She had organized it into sections. She was making inquiries about the invoice dates. Jail appointment, Saturday morning. Pruitt was 58 years old and had been building things in Jefferson County for 30 years. Fleet of yellow trucks. 17 employees. A reputation for winning city contracts that other contractors couldn't seem to touch. That reputation was sustained through patience and through the right conversations with the right people, men who had mortgages and children in private school, and needs that sat slightly beyond what their salaries covered. Gerald Okafor, who had been clearing Pruitt's final inspections for 11 years, understood this arrangement perfectly. So did the two city council members, whose campaigns Pruitt had funded for 3 consecutive cycles. He had been doing this since before most of his subcontractors were born. Who is she? He asked. She runs a hair salon. 72 years old. Ensley neighborhood. He was quiet for a moment. In 30 years. No one had come at him with less apparent threat. That was. He decided. Almost certainly not the whole picture. Find out what she knows, he said. And make sure she understands there are easier ways to spend her time. The pressure arrived in stages. The way it always does when a system decides it does not want to be questioned. The building inspector arrived at Washington's Beauty on a Tuesday morning, unannounced, with a clipboard and the careful neutrality of a man who has been told exactly what to find. Delores was doing Mrs. Patterson's color when he walked in. She let him walk the shop for 12 minutes before she spoke. Your office called last Thursday, she said. Eyes still on the mirror. I have the email with the timestamp if you need it. No inspection was scheduled. Routine compliance check, he said. Of course it is. He cited 3 violations. Improper chemical storage, inadequate ventilation documentation, a fire door issue with the rear exit, a door she had replaced herself 3 years earlier with one that exceeded code requirements by 2 grades, 45 days to comply or face closure. That same week, a letter arrived from the property management company. The lease would not be renewed. 60 days. Planned renovations. Nothing to be done. And 2 phone calls from suppliers she had worked with for 19 and 12 years, both citing policy changes, both unable to say more. The following Monday, a black SUV parked across the street at 9 in the morning and did not move until 6 in the evening. No one came in. No one got out. 2 clients canceled without explanation. One had been coming every 3 weeks for 11 years. Delores swept her floor and did her remaining clients and turned off the lights and went home and sat at her kitchen table with the 3 documents laid out in a row. She knew what a coordinated campaign looked like. She also knew what it meant when someone made the pattern this visible this fast. They wanted her afraid before she committed fully to the fight. They wanted the cost to be clear and immediate. The calculation she made was different from the one they expected. He came on a Wednesday afternoon. The SUV had been gone for 2 days, and she had started to think the pressure campaign was moving to a different phase. Then the door of Washington's Beauty opened, and Reginald Pruitt walked in. He was dressed, the way he always dressed, collared shirt, jacket. The careful presentation of a man who wanted to be taken for a professional, rather than feared as a threat. He looked at the salon, the way men like him look at things they have already decided to dismiss. Mrs. Washington, he said. He smiled. It did not reach his eyes. I apologize for coming in, unannounced. I was in the neighborhood. Delores was at the back station. She did not stop what she was doing. Mr. Pruitt, sit down if you like. I'll be a moment. He did not sit. He moved slowly along the wall of photographs, hands in his pockets. The posture of a man making a casual inspection. I heard you've been spending time on your son's case, he said. That's understandable. Any mother would. But federal paperwork can be confusing, even for younger people. He paused in front of a photograph. At your age, it might be better to let the attorneys handle it. Delores set down her comb. She turned to face him. The attorneys, she said, had 11 months and didn't look at the invoice dates. Pruitt's smile did not change. Sometimes These things just have to run their course. Mr. Pruitt. Her voice was the same as it always was, level. Without heat. A man signed his name on 11 documents during a 6-week period when he could not hold a pen without pain. No one asked about his hand. No one asked about the dates. No one asked why a shell company was registered to a middle initial he has never had in his life. She picked up her comb. I asked. That's the difference between me and the attorneys. Something moved behind Pruitt's eyes. The smile stayed. But it was doing more work now. Holding something back. Old buildings have bad wiring sometimes. He said quietly, things happen. Delores looked at him for a moment. Mr. Pruitt, she said. I spent 15 years reading documents for a living. I know exactly what you just said and what you meant by it. She turned back to the mirror. I also know that a man who needs to threaten a 72-year-old woman in her own salon has already run out of better options. You can see yourself out. He stood there for a moment. Then he left. She watched his reflection in the mirror until the door closed behind him. Then she picked up her phone and called Patricia. He came in person, she said. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Day? That means he's scared. I know. Delores said. Good. She opened the drawer under the kitchen counter, reached past the tax records and Calvin's death certificate, and found the ivory business card at the back behind a folder of receipts. 11 years old. Patricia Holt. Senior paralegal. Holt and Associates. On the back. In her own handwriting call. If you ever need anything. P. Patricia was a lawyer now. It was 1 a.m. when Delores called. Patricia picked up on the third ring. Day, you said to call. I meant it. Delores sent photographs of the documents. Patricia called back in 40 minutes. Someone coordinated this. The lease. The inspection. The suppliers. That's not a streak of bad luck. No. And I found something else. She turned to the shell company registration in the discovery file. The company they say Marcus set up. It's registered under Marcus A. Washington. That's his name. No. Delores said. It's not. Marcus doesn't have a middle name. Never has. His birth certificate says Marcus Washington. No initial. No middle name. I named him. I know. The silence on the line changed. Someone built this identity from a document that had an initial he doesn't have. Delores continued. They got one letter wrong. That letter is the seam in everything. Day, if that's right, I need to find which document they used. Which file inside Pruitt's office had that initial on it. To compel that, I'd need to file a motion. Hearing in 6 to 8 days if I push the clerk. Marcus has 10 days to sign the plea. The math sat between them. I'll file tomorrow morning, Patricia said. 3 days later, the U.S. Attorney's office moved the deadline. Garrett called Marcus. 18 months now. Minimum security. Early release. Likely, but the offer expired in 48 hours. Not 10 days. Marcus called his mother. They moved it up. 2 days. Garrett says, if we don't have something concrete, don't sign anything. Mama, I'm looking at 22 years, if we're wrong. I know what you're looking at. Do you trust me? A silence that stretched the length of everything between them. 44 years. Every Sunday phone call. The thing she had told him, and the one she had not. Yes, ma'am. He said quietly. 2 days. Give me 2 days. She called Theodore Greer that evening. Teddy had retired from the FBI's Birmingham field office 2 years earlier. His wife had been a client for 9 years. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked at his hands flat on the desk. Day. If Pruitt can pull a lease termination and red flag a health inspection and kill 2 supplier accounts in the same 2 weeks, he has infrastructure. People in positions where people tend to stay, you start moving against that. It moves back. He paused. I have a pension. A grandkid starting college in the fall. I know you do. I am not saying no. I am saying you need to understand what you're asking. I understand it. He looked at her across the desk. She was 72 years old, and she was looking back at him with the stillness of someone who has already run the calculation and accepted the result "What do you need?" he said. "The mailbox rental agreement. The shell company's Alabama address is a UPS store in Hoover. Who rented it? In what name?" He called her that evening. The mailbox had been rented 14 months earlier by a man named Dennis Caulfield, head of accounts payable. Pruitt Construction. The rental agreement listed the beneficiary as Marcus A. Washington. He used the initial, Delores said. He used the initial. Where did he get it? That I can't tell you, without Pruitt's internal vendor file. Patricia is filing for it. But the hearing is 6 days out, and we have 48 hours. She paused. Patricia found someone inside Pruitt's accounting office, a woman named Renata. She filed a harassment complaint against Caulfield 2 years ago, settled quietly. She kept a copy of the vendor file herself, in case one day she became the one being blamed. Patricia told her if she stays quiet, Marcus signs a confession for something he didn't do. Renata's been waiting 2 years for a reason to stop being quiet. Teddy was silent. If Caulfield finds out, she knows the risk. She made her choice. Renata sent the file at 6:15 the next morning. Patricia had found her name in the county civil records, a harassment complaint against Caulfield, settled and sealed 2 years earlier. Renata had worked in Pruitt's accounting office for 9 years. She had signed things she was told to sign and looked away from things she was told not to see. And she had understood since the settlement that if anything ever went wrong, Caulfield would need someone to blame, and she was the most convenient candidate in the office. So she had kept a copy of the vendor file, locked in her car, in a sealed envelope, because she had spent 2 years waiting for a reason to stop being the person who stayed quiet. Patricia had given her the reason. If you don't send it, Patricia told her, a man signs a confession for something he didn't do, and Caulfield keeps his job. Renata had sat with that for one night, the internal record Pruitt's office had created, when Marcus signed his first subcontract. A data entry employee had filled in a field for middle initial. The system flagged blank fields. The employee typed A. No reason. A placeholder. Never corrected. That had migrated from that one internal record into every document Caulfield used to build the false identity, into the shell company registration, into the banking records, into 11 fraudulent invoices. One letter, typed by someone thinking about something else. That letter had moved $412,000 in federal school funds through a company that did not truly exist, and had placed Marcus Washington in county lockup for 4 months. Patricia had the file by 8 in the morning. She called Delores. We have it, she said. Delores closed her eyes. When she opened them, the kitchen looked exactly as it always had. The hearing is this morning, Patricia said. 9 o'clock. I know. On the way out the door, Delores stopped. She went back to the kitchen. She picked up the binder not because she needed it anymore, but because it had been with her from the beginning, and she was not a woman who left things behind. The courtroom was small, and it was fuller than it should have been for a Wednesday morning evidentiary hearing. Word had moved through Ensley, the way it always moves in a neighborhood, through the salon, through the church parking lot, through the chain of phone calls between women who had been coming to Washington's Beauty for 20 years. A row of them sat in the gallery in their weekday clothes. They did not look like they intended to leave until this was finished. Garrett sat near the back, briefcase on his knees. Not quite prosecution and not quite defense. The U.S. attorney's representative was there early, flanked by a paralegal with a cart of file boxes. He did not look at the defense table, the practiced avoidance of a man who has come to win and does not want to see the room clearly until he has to. Patricia rose when the judge entered and laid the documents out one by one. The vendor file. Marcus's birth certificate, no middle name. No initial. Filed 44 years ago at the county records office by a woman who had named her son Marcus Washington and nothing else. The hospital records physician's notation. Limited grip strength. Right hand. 6-week recovery. Patient advised to avoid fine motor activity for 30 days. The shell company registration, Marcus A. Washington. An initial that had never existed in any document Marcus Washington had ever signed. The UPS store mailbox rental agreement with Dennis Caulfield's name on the signature line. A side-by-side comparison of every document Marcus had actually signed contracts. Tax forms. a 2019 car loan against the 11 fraudulent invoices, 3 pieces of paper, 1 broken hand, 1 letter that never belonged to him, a broken hand that couldn't hold a pen. Patricia said, a name with a letter he has never had in his life. A mailbox rented in that name by a man who works for Reginald Pruitt. She paused. The government did not build this case on Marcus Washington. They built it on a document that approximated him, borrowed his name, and added 1 letter too many. That is not evidence. That is a forgery, wearing his face. The representative rose. The vendor file's source was irregular. Authentication was incomplete. The defense was asking the court to vacate a federal indictment on the basis of a data entry error and a handwriting argument made by an attorney who was not a certified forensic examiner. The court doesn't need a forensic examiner, Patricia said. The court needs to look at a birth certificate and a piece of paper and count the letters in a name. The gallery was very still. The judge looked at the birth certificate for a long time. She looked at the vendor file. She looked at the signature comparison. She looked at the hospital records and the physician's notation about right-hand grip strength during recovery. She looked at the UPS store rental agreement with Caulfield's name in the signature line. Then she looked at the representative. Counsel, does the government have a substantive response to the vendor file? A long pause. Something moved behind the representative's eyes, not quite shame, but the recognition of a case that had just become a different shape and would not change back. The government would request time to review the new materials. The defendant has been in custody for 4 months. The judge said, motion granted. The indictment is stayed. The defendant is to be released pending full review. She paused. I am also referring this matter to the FBI's Public Corruption Task Force in Atlanta for an independent investigation into the originating contractor and all associated officials. In the gallery, someone exhaled a long, deliberate breath. The sound of pressure held for months, finally finding an exit. Court is adjourned. Garrett did not move for a moment. He sat in the back row with his briefcase on his knees and his eyes on the floor. The posture of a man doing a private accounting he did not enjoy. When the gallery began to empty around him, he rose and made his way to the defense table. He did not look at Marcus. He looked at Delores. I should have seen it, he said quietly. Delores looked at him over her reading glasses. Yes, she said. You should have. He nodded once. The small nod of a man accepting something he cannot undo. And walked out past the reporters without stopping. Dennis Caulfield was arrested 11 days later. His cooperation agreement took 72 hours to finalize, and when it was done, what it revealed was bigger than the connections folder had shown. He gave them Pruitt. He gave them Gerald Okafor, the building inspector, who had been clearing Pruitt's final inspections for 11 years in exchange for quarterly payments to a consulting LLC registered in his wife's name. He gave them 2 city council staff members who had been expediting permits, and he gave them a deputy in the county contracts office who had been steering bids. He gave them 2 other names that mattered most, Raymond Tibbs and Anthony Cruz, both subcontractors, both black men from Birmingham's Western District, both of whom had had their identities borrowed for fraudulent invoices over the previous 7 years. Not 1 project, not 2, but a pattern running across 14 municipal and school contracts. Neither had ever been charged. Neither had ever been told. Their names had been used and returned like equipment from a job site. And they had spent years with a low-level friction in their professional lives that they could not quite explain. A bonding application denied. A credit question that took months to clear. A contract that went to someone else despite the lowest bid. They had assumed it was the ordinary difficulty of running a small business in a city that had its preferred contractors and its preferred relationships. They had not known their names were the reason. When the FBI contacted Raymond Tibbs, he was sitting at home. He was 61 years old. When the agent finished explaining, Raymond looked at his hands. 3 years ago, he said slowly, a credit agency called me about a business I'd never heard of. I said they had the wrong man. He paused. I let it go, because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Reginald Pruitt was arrested on a Tuesday morning in front of his office on Lakeshore Parkway. 2 FBI vehicles. 1 news van. He was in his good jacket, the one he wore to client meetings. The one that said professional rather than afraid, and he looked at the cameras with the expression of a man encountering, for the first time in 30 years, a version of himself. He had always managed to avoid seeing directly. Gerald Okafor resigned from the city building inspector's office the day before his own arrest. It did not help him. Caulfield had given them everything. The full scope of it was larger than even Delores had mapped in the connections folder. 7 years of fraudulent subcontracts across 14 school and municipal projects. 11 borrowed names. 400,000 was not the number. It was a number from one project in 1 year. The total, across 7 years, was considerably more. When they put the cuffs on, Pruitt looked up. Across Lakeshore Parkway, on the far sidewalk, a small woman in a good coat stood watching. Silver locks, reading glasses on a chain. She was not smiling. She was not doing anything except standing still and looking at him the way she had looked at him in her salon patient. Without heat. The way you look at something you have already finished thinking about. He looked away first. Pruitt did not say anything when they walked him to the vehicle. There was nothing left to say. Marcus Washington walked out of the county jail on a Wednesday afternoon. Delores was in the parking lot. She had not brought anyone else. He came through the door in the clothes he had been wearing when they brought him in. And he stood in the parking lot sunlight for a moment. Adjusting, she walked to him. He put his arms around her and held on. On the drive home, he was quiet until the avenue. Then Mama. The binder. The way you read those files. Where did that come from? She kept her eyes on the road. The sign for Washington's beauty was ahead. The same sign she had hung the week after Calvin died. 15 years. She said, "Before your father got sick, I was a paralegal at Watkins & Associates. Civil rights work." The car was very quiet. "You never told me?" "No." "Why not?" She thought about it the way she thought about everything. "Because I walked away from it, and I didn't want to carry it back every time I looked at you. I wanted to be your mother. Not what I used to be." Pause. "And because if you knew, you'd have expected me to save everyone." Marcus looked out at the neighborhood passing. "You saved me. I saved you." She said, "That's different from everyone." She sold the salon in the fall. The property company had rescinded the lease termination the day after Pruitt's arrest. Administrative error. Deeply regretted. Nothing to be done about the misunderstanding. She had filed that letter in a folder labeled "Of course" and kept it anyway, because that was the kind of woman she was. But the decision to sell had nothing to do with the lease. For 4 months, she had sat at a kitchen table reading files. And she had not missed the shop the way she expected to. What she missed, what she found herself reaching for at midnight, was the work itself. The reading, the slow, patient construction of an argument, until every piece held. She sold the building to a young woman from Ensley, who wanted to open a community center. Delores negotiated the price down by $30,000, on the condition that the new space include a free legal consultation room, open to anyone in the neighborhood who needed it. No appointment required. No fee. She thought Calvin would have liked that. She took an office in Patricia's suite downtown. No certification. No. Bar card. She was listed as a consultant. She read files. She found the seam in every document that everyone else had been too certain or too tired or too busy to look for. Then the FBI found 2 more names. Raymond Tibbs came to her office in November, in his work clothes, and told her about the credit agency call 3 years ago. The business he had never heard of. The debt he had let go. Delores opened a new folder. "Tell me everything," she said. From the beginning. She was not a hero. She was a woman who had learned a skill, set it down for 40 years, and picked it back up when her son called from a jail phone and asked her not to sign his name to a lie. The skill had been there the whole time, in the back of a drawer, waiting. Some things you carry, whether you intend to or not. The only question is when you decide to use them. There are people in your life right now who know something the system doesn't want known. They carry it quietly, behind a styling chair or a kitchen table, behind 40 years of looking like exactly what they appear to be. The question I want to leave you with is this. If the system failed someone you love tomorrow, if the paperwork said one thing and the truth said another, would there be someone in your corner who knew how to read the difference? Leave your answer in the comments. If Delores' story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, because there are more people like her out there. And more people like Marcus. And their stories deserve to be told.